Hey everyone, welcome to a special episode on 4GQ TV. Today we have a very special guest. Also, real quick, Cerebral Paul is next to me on the panel, also known as Paul in the gaming community. But we have Ethan Banville with us. Hey Ethan.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. I've seen your YouTube channel. I've seen some of the work. I'm blown away by the animation. I think it's really cool. And can you tell us a little bit how you got started doing what you do?
Oh boy. I'm much older than I look, so it was a long time ago, but I started in LA. I did my last semester of college. I went to Emerson College out of Boston, did my last semester in LA, interned at Warner Brothers Comedy Development, and then just started from the ground up production assistant jobs. My first job was a night script PA because it was pre-email. So it was literally me getting the script at about 4:30 in the morning, making 112 copies, delivering them around the lot, and then driving around until about 8 a.m. in the morning, the next morning, to deliver the script. So working 20-hour days. But it was fun. It was like Warner Brothers lot, Friends was there, ER was there, all these big shows. I was on the Drew Carey show, a lot of great energy. I wanted to write comedy, so I got to really experience a lot of that. And then it was just working that until I made enough connections to get a writer's assistant job, and then working the writer's assistant job until I connected with a showrunner who would give me an opportunity, to write. And then it just kind of kept building and building from there. And then animation didn't even come in. I did live action and action sports stuff until probably about 2011. I had married a Canadian, became a Canadian, started working in Canada that does a lot of animation, as you guys probably know. A lot of shows are produced up there. So I started working in animation up there. And then when I came back to the US, it just kind of, traveled with me. So that's kind of the short version of the story.
That's an amazing story. That is a story of perseverance of somebody who wanted to get into this industry, stay in the industry, and move up in the
Yep.
industry. It takes a lot to do that. A lot of people get settled and they stick with one position. My brother-in-law's brother worked for Discovery, and
Hmm.
he just stayed on the editing floor. That was it. That's
Yep.
all he didn't have any motivation to move up. So your story
Yeah.
is
But not a bad choice if you find what you love to do and you can get consistent work doing it. This business is nuts. I mean, it's just, especially on the writing side and the animation side, as we're seeing now with the shrinking of that part of the industry, it's up and down and up and down. Whereas editors,
Yeah.
always needed. Something always needs to be cut down, for airing on a different network if they've relicensed it or something, or just changing out the format or helping the story if it doesn't work from what they've got. So good for him for finding the space that he was happy in.
well in your story. So you you moved up, and
Yep.
eventually you got to the point where you're like, okay, I'm going to do animation.
Yep.
And when did you realize that it's something that you want to kind of stick with a little bit?
Honestly, it's something that I love the idea that James and I came up with, the odd ones out, James. I mean, I liked writing in animation, but it is a much harder thing to make a go at as a animation writer than it is a live action writer. So it was kind of like you take the work where it's coming. Sometimes the industry is producing more animation, like during the pandemic, sometimes it's producing more live action. And then I got to the point in my career where I was just looking for what's going to excite me. Like I had written on preschool, I had written on Gap stuff, I had written on older kid stuff with animation. And then when I met James through a producer named Michael Zumas, I was like, oh, this kid's like a young Larry David. Like this is what I love. I started out writing multi-camera comedies. The kind of premise and the act out in this feels very, very similar. So I just said, you know what, I want to do this in this space, which is his world. And he, of course, at that point only had 3.2 million subscribers. He's now got 20 million about so, and is a huge superstar. But I wanted to stay in it, one, because I love the idea, and two, I didn't know how YouTube worked. I didn't know all the background stuff. I didn't know how someone would build a channel and monetize it and obviously continue to grow their channel and then track all the analytics and all that kind of stuff. So it really was less about being animation specific and more about the passion for the premise of the show. And then also, I just always want to keep learning. Like if you just stop learning, I feel like what is the point? Like, there's always something more, to room and grow. So that really kept me in it. And from the moment I met James and we started developing the show to the moment we ended, I learned all along the way. It was literally like I got to go to animation school without ever picking up a pencil because James taught me the way he did stuff. And then we had an animation EP that came in to help us staff the show. He brought his experience. And then, of course, you've got the storyboard artists and storyboard teams who bring new jokes and more story and everything to it. You've got the animation, you got the voice acting, you've got the composition, and the scoring and everything throughout the color correction and vignettes. And it was just like every step of the way I learned something and the show got better. So, I'm at the point now where I still am not going to work exclusively in animation, mostly because the industry is dead in that space for the moment. It should swing up again. But the pandemic pumped a lot of animation into the pipeline. So they've got tons of animation to last them through for a while. And they ran a lot of it, obviously, during the strike. So the hope now is end of 2024, things will kind of swing up in animation then. So right now I'm working in unscripted, which is the biggest kind of thing going on right now. A little bit of scripted, and then hopefully the end of the year into next year, animation will start coming back because there's a lot of really good people who aren't working. There just aren't jobs right now. And it's like, the character designer for Oddballs, our show looked great. Like she came up with amazing stuff. One of the most talented people I've worked with, total nice person as well. She hasn't really worked much. And you're just like, why? And it's like, oh, well, Warner's laid off 500 people. Netflix cut their internal animation stuff. Everybody is just slicing, trying to make up for the strikes and the overages and everything like that. So the YouTube animation space is really keeping, I think, people inspired, with animation. So I think, I don't know. I mean, it's a long answer to a very kind of complex question, I guess. So it's
that
mostly to
industry.
survive.
Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, I was just gonna say to survive in this industry,
Yeah.
you have to,
Yeah.
it has to be fluid. You have to be flexible.
Yeah, and I was just going to point out that a lot of industries are going through that post-pandemic thing where they did all this stuff was picked up and added during the pandemic. Now
Yeah.
that's over, so now it swings back the other way a little bit and starts to, go back to what it was before. Or in this case, they're glutted with the stuff now, so they got to run through that. Then they're going to go back, like you said, it'll probably hit an upswing, and all of a sudden they're going to need work again, or
Yep.
workers. So
Fingers crossed.
yeah, fingers crossed. Yeah. Because there's always a good place for good animation, as far as I'm concerned. If it's done well. Yeah.
No. Look, Gen Z has proven that time and time again. There's so much, obviously, that's been licensed from, South Korea and Japan and places overseas with animation that for years and years and years. I mean, I watched a million different shows that I had never heard of because my staff was like, "Oh, I grew up watching, this one. You should go check it out." Like, "Oh, you never saw One Punch Man?" Like, like you got to go see so getting to really dig into and kind of nerd out on, and I'm working with Hamanations right now as well, and he's big into Avatar: The Last Airbender, so I had to go and kind of watch that and kind of see what his influences were and stuff. So it's and then I grew up watching like Japan Animation, G-Force, and kind of all these 5 different people with 5 different personalities have 5 different chips, which come together to form the same robot with a giant sword. Like that was like every
Voltron,
other
baby.
show.
Voltron,
G-Force, like there's a million of them at that time. All the Robotech stuff and everything like that. So
I look a lot older than you, but I don't think I'm a whole lot older than you. Wow. One of us is aged better than the other, I think.
It's a filter. I've got a special filter going on.
I was just going to say, when you were speaking about Gen Z and the different influences and content, I do think that, for example, Hollywood's starting to borrow a lot from YouTubers, TikTokers, just in general, comedy styles, skits, the fast pace. So I think that, like you said, there's going to be plenty of content to always be out there and to come, but sometimes it might not come from a major network or a major source. And if I look at the YouTube channel, For example, there's thousands of hours of entertainment on there just
Yeah.
alone. That is, you
Yeah.
know, just not a major network streaming service,
Yep.
just on YouTube. So I think that's pretty cool. Um, you know, as somebody who's been in the industry, I wanted to ask you, do you feel like that AI is taking away some of these things? Or do you think that studios will implement AI to help out and not take away?
Oh, they'll definitely do it to take away as much as they can. I mean, their goal is to make as much money for their shareholders as they possibly can. That's their job. And if you think otherwise, if you just want to believe that they're good people, they're fine people, but their job is not to make sure there's jobs for all the animators and storyboard artists and writers and directors and actors. Their job is to make a ton of money. So, with the strike last year, we negotiated certain protections, but, there's a limit. That's not going to prevent them from licensing an AI produced show out of Czechoslovakia. So it is. I'm sorry, the Czech Republic, not Czechoslovakia anymore. Um, should be old enough to know that. But yeah, I mean, it's like it's going to be there. It's going to happen. But if writers are smart, and we talk to our students about this at the LA Film School where I teach, is you can use it as a tool. Because if you're creating a pitch deck, which of course is how James and I pitched and sold the show, you can now use AI to create images out of thin air. You can use the pro version of GPT or something, and not have to expend the money that you would have to expend to hire professional artists to create this, this kind of animation, for you and everything like that. So in that case, it's great for pitching and showing proof of concept and things of that sort. But the thing that people have to remember, of course, is when you're using it, say you're using it for your YouTube channel, you're pushing that into the AI system. You have no ownership over that being used for future things. And then suddenly the stuff you're putting up on your YouTube channel and kind of monetizing, well, if somebody else uses it, you have no protections. It's just out there kind of in the universe. So I think it's going to be something that it's always going to be evolving, I guess is kind of the simpler answer to it. But I do think that it does have value to make a living as in this business at this point. You have to produce a lot of content. I mean, you have to produce a lot of content. You have to write a lot of scripts. You have to generate a lot of things. So if you're able to, basically come up with, say, the 12 story points of a feature film, and then say to Chat GPT, write a screenplay based on these 12 points, and then suddenly you're given a 110-page script that you can then go, all right, 50% of this sucks, but the other 50% is a great starting point that I can use, and it saved you kind of that amount of time. And over time, of course, that will get better and better and better. But again, that's not to say that somebody else won't end up with that same kind of story pushed at them through Chat GPT, which then they put into a script, which then they take out before you to the town, and then they sell it. And then suddenly you're taking your script out and the studio goes, oh yeah, we already have this almost exact thing in development. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
So it's scary in that way. But I think it's just something that it's here, like it's not going away.
Yeah.
The unions can fight it as much as we want. But if you're naive to think that it is going to be controlled in some way, you're out of your mind, because we're not the only country on the planet.
Right.
All the other countries are developing their own AIs. They all have their own entertainment industries now. So guess what's going to eventually take over this? So, if you are a creative, start producing your own stuff, because you own it all. There's places you can put it up. You can put it up on YouTube, on Rumble. I mean, there's a million different places to put your content out there. And then you have complete control over it. And you can do it from anywhere. You do not need to move to Los Angeles. You do not need to move to Atlanta or New York or any major metropolitan area that costs stupid amounts of money to live. All you need is bandwidth and some time. And I will tell you that the story is the same for Odd Ones Out, as it is for Haminations, as it is for Alan Becker, animation versus games, animation versus science, animation versus math guy, animation versus animation. They all started when they were 16. They all started with a drawing tablet. They all started putting up little web comics and videos on YouTube. And now they're all incredibly successful. And AI will have no effect on them, none at all. So, except that it'll rip them off
Right.
and people will post it to their things, but nobody can take away their specific voices. AI definitely can't do that. So, it's one of those tricky problems where, it's here. There's nothing we can do about it other than to just put our stuff out there and hopefully find an audience for it.
Yeah, that cat's out of the bag, and there's no putting it
Yeah.
back. It's just finding a way to work with it instead of
Yeah.
trying to.
You mentioned a pitch deck. So when you guys pitched the show to Netflix with the pitch
Yep.
deck, did James draw everything on the pitch deck, or did you guys actually a better way to phrase this is, so when you use the pitch deck to Netflix and Netflix takes a look at it and then Netflix is like, okay, we're going to run with this. We like this. Does James then have to do like all the animation, or do they actually hire their own people to do that kind of stuff?
So first of all, we're talking about Oddballs, book now, graphic novel with 5 new stories, just like on the show, available everywhere books are sold: Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart, Target, et cetera, et cetera. A little bit of self-promotion. So the way it worked was that James and I got together. We came up with the idea. We built the pitch deck ourselves. He did the artwork for it. I did all the text for it. And then we went around town, as you've seen probably in his videos. Everybody said no to us. One company even told us that we would never sell it because the networks would want control of James's channel. And of course, it's like, this kid makes all his money off this channel. We're not giving Disney, the control over his YouTube channel. And then we ended up at Netflix. We did the pitch where we actually, for this process, it was before the pandemic. So we actually went into offices and physically pitched the story out to executives while showing some of the we call them moment paintings, from possible episodes that James had drawn for the pitch deck, and walk them through it. And thankfully, the executive at Netflix was like, oh, we do deals like this all the time. Like, we'll just have the TV rights. James keeps his channel. And that's kind of, the end of it. And also her 2 sons were huge fans of the Odd Ones Out. So it was like, oh, this is a match made in heaven. And then at that point, they had their own in-house animation studio, but they were preparing to kind of get rid of it, which we didn't know at the time. So they introduced us. That executive knew that. So she kind of introduced us to an outside animation studio. So once we went into development, it was still all on James and I, and then they brought in an animation EP who actually does the voice of Stuart, the ball of slime on the show, and he helped us build out the storyboards with some people that he had worked with for the pilot episode, so that we could then pitch it to Netflix corporate, so that they would go, thumbs up, here's a full budget, go into production, now hire a staff of 150 people. And then once you get the full budget out of development, then you're off to the races. 2 years of everything from story ideation all the way through to the final delivery and approvals for quality control and all that kind of stuff.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Well, I'm glad that Netflix picked it up, because this is a beautiful.
Me too.
It's a beautiful piece of art and entertainment. It's funny. It's neatly designed, and I'm a fan of cartoon work. So even though some people say, oh, well, the lines are a lot less than detail work, you tell more of a story with few lines. And I think that's harder, to be honest with you. So I appreciate it so much of how it's done. Once Netflix gives you, or just say any studio in general, you get they say they give you the green light, they give you the money. Do they tell you how much to budget on the animation studio to hire the employees, or do you guys get to choose all of that?
So it depends how you work it. Technically, you could work it that you could control all of that. But if you ever want to see why you shouldn't do that, there's a great documentary called Overnight about the guys that wrote and produced the Boondock Saints, which was a big kind of cult, movie. Yeah, they completely destroyed their careers by the time they were done that movie. They were let out of Hollywood for all the screw ups, just because you want experts in every section. So, when you're talking about not only the money side of things and the scheduling side of things, but also the cybersecurity side of things, you need a studio. You need an animation studio who's worked with the streamers before, who knows the standardization that they have to meet. China is constantly trying to rip off intellectual property. They're hacking Netflix and all the other places all the time. The pirates are. So, it is a big, big job with a lot of things that you don't even think about. So we were introduced to a company called Atomic Cartoons through Netflix. They're a Canadian founded company, but they have a big footprint down here now in Los Angeles. They have offices in Burbank, as well as a huge studio in Vancouver. We're about, I don't know, I'd say 75% of our work was done in Canada as far as the storyboarding, animation, editing, etc. But that was split between like Vancouver, Calgary, I think Calgary and Toronto. So they came in and they really helped us look at the budget, look at what we could do for a schedule, how much time could we allot for the writing? Could we afford to have writers on staff? If we had writers on staff, then that meant we were only going to have enough money for 2 like lower level writers, which is not great when you're running a show, because that just means when you're running a show, you have to do 3,000 things every day. So if you're having to also like page one rewrite young writers because they're just not experienced enough to have it, that's going to add work to your workload. So we ended up going with a freelance model, which they scheduled out, which there were all sorts of issues with that, but that's a whole other thing. And then we also had to schedule out the storyboarding process. But then you also can't factor in, and this is why it's good to have a studio working with you, because hopefully they'll have your back a little bit or have worked in some sort of kind of little extra money put aside for such cases. But you never know when the network is going to suddenly go, you know what, I don't like this story anymore. We're killing it. And that will happen during the script stage. That happens in the storyboarding stage. That happens in the outlining stage. And that means you got to start over. And that means everything gets pushed, which means every day you push the schedule, that costs thousands of dollars, tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars. So you can imagine James and I trying to run this show and do all of that on top of coming up with funny ideas. It's hard to come up with funny episode ideas when the weight of millions of dollars is, and how to spend it is crushing down on you. So thankfully, the people at Atomic were great in helping us recruit a great team. We had a wonderful couple of line producers, one in Canada and one here, who, when it got towards the end of the season, which happens with all shows, and you're kind of all burnt out and that final episode is just kicking your butt, trying to get it just right. They had hidden some money away all season long, and we were able to, just kind of, make it happen. So for those out there who are doing it independently, definitely, obviously do it independently as long as you can. But I can tell you from having worked with James, that means you're working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. You're not doing anything else. And then when you can, you start putting together a team of people who can really help you build out a pipeline and really make it happen. Hammer Nations has this guy named Nate that he works with, who I've talked to quite a bit. And boy, what a value a good producer, even in the YouTube space, can really bring to your product.
Yeah.
But yeah, don't try to do it all yourself. If you
sounds
can afford not
basically
to.
basically it sounds like what you're saying is learn to delegate. If you're not used to delegating, you need to learn to delegate.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you micromanage everything, you will die. Like, you literally will fall asleep at your computer. You'll probably crash your car. There's just not enough hours in the day. And it takes practice. I mean, hiring, you bring up a good point, because delegation means you have to hire people who can do the job, and then you don't have to worry about them. You can literally just say, hey, this thing needs doing. And they'll be like, got it. And then you'll hear back from them at the end of the day or at the end of the week or whenever the thing is due. And that's a huge part of the process, because so many people look good on paper, they give a great interview, and then you get them on the show and you're like, oh my gosh, they're completely wrong for this and they're making our jobs much, much harder. And then you got to go through the process of, well, now we got to find somebody new. But the animation industry is so small that the person who's already on my show that we're going to get part ways with is going to hear that we're looking for somebody new.
Yeah.
Because they might even know the person that replaces them. So it is it's not fun telling people that they no longer have a job. But you know, the best way I can think to describe it is it happens to everybody in every job in this entertainment business, where it's not that there's anything wrong with you. You're just not a good fit for the show. You know, like you could probably knock it out of the park on another show, but our show, you're just not quite there yet. And we really pushed our show to be, from a story perspective and from even an animation perspective for that space, we really pushed it to elevate things with storytelling, and just kind of, Netflix really let us push boundaries on a lot of the humor and didn't pull us back, which is why so many parents love watching it with their kids, and their and teenagers love it as well. So it is, some people are meant to work in preschool, some people are meant to work in adult stuff. You know, you just don't know where you're going to end up. So
I gotta say, as a person who grew up on Warner Brothers old Looney Tunes cartoons and stuff,
yeah, me too.
It was fun to, as you get older, you see all those little adult sides of those cartoons that you didn't see as a kid. And so if you're doing that, that's what I love. I love those multiple layered cartoons or animations where the kids are laughing because of what's happening, but the adults are sticking because they caught something. You know, it's like, oh, that's cute.
Yep. Yeah. And that's, I mean, that's what we really got to do with the book. Netflix basically said, do whatever you want. We're not going to give you notes. So we were like, all right. Yeah. So they knew they were going to get their, you know, chunk of the money. And we were like, great, thank you. So we just were like, okay, we're going to just do like 5 episodes we didn't get to do on the show for whatever reason. Had a blast writing them. And, you know, so it definitely, I think it lends itself more for kind of middle and high schoolers, you know, than it does for younger kids, you know, for sure, because the stuff is a little more cerebral. You know, James hears his parents saying it's time to end the James experiment, and then decides that means that they're going to kill him because the town is full of kids that are experiments and other experiments. And so he tries to live every moment like it's his last, and of course pisses off a bunch of people, and suddenly there's a mob that's out to kill him. So a little more intense than some of the episodes of the show. But then again, I mean, we had Toasty on the show, who you know, was a child that they created, and then their awful parenting led basically to them getting divorced, and Toasty becoming a nightmare. So, you know, the subtext was there on the show as well. So we had fun.
Everything that you're saying so far about the show is truly interesting. But there's one thing about Toasty that you showed us earlier.
Oh, the reversible?
Yes.
The reversible Toasty. Let's see it.
So I'll try to do it without him disappearing. So very early on when we were in development, I met James's merch guy, a great guy who's at Creator Inc., named Paul Quinn. And we were talking about different merchandises that we can do and stuff. And I said, I have this idea. Toasty is a toaster. I was like, I want to make a toy where you can kind of reach inside the slots and like turn him inside out, so he goes from good Toasty to bad Toasty. So they came up with this version of it where we've got bad Toasty, but then if you just turn him inside out, and then suddenly you've got good Toasty, which is just a fun kind of, you know, I mean, I grew up with Transformers, early Transformers. So this to me was like, you know, the manifestation of everything I love about, you know, toys and cartoons. And you can go to theoddonesout.com and click on the Oddballs banner if you want to get yourself a
I'll tell you what, if I
Toasty.
ever go back to working for schools again, I'm getting one of those. And then if it's good Toasty on my desk, talk to me. If it's bad Toasty on my desk, don't talk to me. You know?
That's great. I like that. That could actually be really useful in Hollywood as well. Like, you know, knowing if your nightmare boss is in a good mood or a bad mood.
Hey, you know, that's a great idea.
Yeah, they could use that with Chuck Lorre is notoriously angry or happy. And I remember interviewing on a show of his, and it was like, yeah, we come in every day and we ask his assistant, was today good Chuck or bad Chuck? I was like, wow, that sounds like a fun place to work. But if you had a reversible Toasty, you would know
Yeah,
what your day was going to be without even,
that's right.
having to ask. I
There
like
you go.
that.
Another selling point. You can just put that up
Yes,
there.
exactly. All you teachers out there, invest in a reversible Toasty to let your kids know either it's a day that they can have fun or a day not to screw around because you're not in a good mood. I love
So
it.
when you were developing the show with James and you had the animation studio guys behind you, uh, for one episode, how long would one episode take to get completed?
Oh, are you talking from like when the scripts were done? Or are you talking from the moment like we're talking about story idea to the moment it goes up on the platform?
Let's go with story idea to the moment that the cartoon is finished, like that episode is finished.
So that would probably be about eight to 12 months, depending on
Ooh.
the episode. Some of the episodes are more complex, so they lend themselves to be a bit longer. Obviously, think about animation and creating a pipeline is when it's a first season show, you got to work out all the kinks. So your earlier episodes are going to take longer than the later episodes. It got to a point where once the um, scripts were mostly finished, it would be about 6 months kind of before it was ready to be presented to Netflix for them to upload to their platform. I mean, most shows it's about 12 months, for most 2D shows to be um, created and animated and then get onto the platform because of course there's the whole process of all of the writing, which takes a few months because you get notes back and forth and you have to pitch the ideas initially. And then when you get the scripts to the storyboard team, then they start storyboarding, which evolves the script further. And then that has to get approved. And then you're recording the voiceover animation, which if you got good voiceover actors, that's creating new dialogue and creating new moments that then have to be either reboarded or in most cases would just be handled in animation if it was there. And then the animation process takes, a while. I mean, it's complex 2D animation. So and then it has to go to Netflix and then Netflix distributes in like 118 languages.
Yeah.
So they
Wow.
basically have to go through it and they have to figure out, okay, how do we translate this?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, to the point where as a showrunner on a Netflix show, because they have such a broad scope of places they go to, you actually have to fill out this whole spreadsheet of, here's the title of this episode. What what does this mean? Like what's the meaning behind it? So that because they can't always just go if it's James's death day, they can't just literally translate that into every language because it won't transfer like the same meaning. It'll
Yeah.
come up with like something else. So you have to kind of give them the meaning behind it. So then people who work in those languages can kind of come up with a version and then that comes back to you. And most of the time you're just like, that's hilarious. I don't, it's such a weird translation of it, but okay. And it goes over there, and does it. So there's like all sorts of platform stuff that has to go on that didn't historically have to happen when it was just, Nickelodeon and
Yeah.
Disney and, the major networks, ABC, Saturday morning, kind of stuff. So yeah, it's a long process. I mean, I
Yeah.
worked on, from the moment we got production, I worked on Oddballs for 2 years and 2 years, 2 months was like the entire process. Like we literally finished uh, on we finished being paid basically the day the show came out and we were at Comic-Con New York. So yeah, it was a crazy long experience. But yeah, I mean, when you think about people like the Simpsons writers and producers and stuff like that, like they get like 2 weeks off a year. That's it. Like it's a constant process that you just have to keep feeding the pipeline because live action, if it's comedy, you table read on Monday, you rewrite and rehearse Tuesday, Wednesday, you shoot Thursday, Friday. On Monday, you start on a new one. and then within 2 weeks that episode is on air. So it's like it's so fast compared to animation, where it's like you're writing these scripts and you don't even know what the characters sound like in the beginning because you haven't cast, the episode. So again, that makes it longer in the writing in the beginning as well, because you're hearing a voice in your head, but maybe James is hearing a different voice in his head, like, and then you hire somebody like Gary Anthony Williams, who's an incredible, he played Mr. McFly and a bunch of other characters. And you're just like, oh my gosh, now that the character's completely opened up, now we're going to have Mr. McFly, who was like an occasional character, be in every episode because he's so bloody hilarious, so things, it's very, expand, contract, expand, contract, expand, contract.
Yep. Yeah, I've heard like Family Guy each episode takes a lot longer than most because Seth uses a full orchestra for each episode and does all kinds of stuff that expands on how long each episode takes. Then there's South Park that can turn out an episode in a week. It's like,
well, those guys, I mean, they obviously do really minimal flash animation,
right.
specifically because they discovered, as they kind of went from kind of potty humor to political humor, that if you're going to do political humor, you have to do it in the moment. You can't have it come out 12 months from now because nobody will care anymore. And so, I mean, I remember I was working on the Warner Brothers lot when that, the first thing that Matt and Trey produced was a video Christmas card called like The Spirit of Christmas or something like that. And I was working on Drew Carey, and our offices opened up right into the alleyway where the ER actors' trailers were. So Clooney was always out there, Noah Wiley, Eric LaSalle, like all those guys were always out there shooting hoops and stuff. And I walked by Clooney's trailer once, and I just heard his assistant and a couple of other people laughing, peeked my head in, was like, hey, what's up? And like, oh, dude, you got to come in. You got to see this. And they showed me the first South Park thing, which was a video Christmas card that some producer had paid Matt and Trey to come up with. And of course, it was like a viral video before there were viral videos online. And next thing you know, those guys, of course, are getting deals thrown at them. And obviously Comedy Central is where they landed. And, the rest is history. They've been doing it for decades now, at this point. So, but yeah, I mean, Family Guy, Seth is an old school animator, right? He went to Rhode Island School of Design. He came out, he worked for Hanna-Barbera before he got the money for Family Guy. And then he got 50 grand and sat in his kitchen for 6 months, drawing everything himself to produce a 2-minute, thing for it. And that work ethic and that perfection is kind of what's different. Like the South Park guys are very story perfection. Seth is very visual perfection. Like he just always wants it to be right. And he still touches, for my friends who work on that show, like he still touches a lot of everything on his shows, even though he's doing a million things. But yes, his passion is he directs all the voiceover. He directs, a lot of the music, and stuff, because he loves, that part of, the world. And then it goes to South Korea. So, the animation gets done over there. So it's a long, long process. But again, boy, getting on that show, being able to be working on a show regularly for 20 years or something. And then that show, I sat with Seth at karaoke once, a billion years ago, and his show had been canceled and it had just been green-lit. And I was like, what's it like to be the only person that's ever happened to? He's like, I'm super thankful. It was like the show was canceled, but then DVD sales and Adult Swim viewings went through the roof. And Fox was like, we messed up.
Yep. I will
Come on back.
I will always remember the first episode back, and he lists all the shows that were started and canceled while he was gone. It's like,
yeah. So yeah, it's a process, and you just got to find the right process for your show, and just know the limitations of each.
And you're right, he's a hard worker, because I know with like the show, the science fiction show he does that I can't think of the name of right now.
Nova.
That he writes all those scripts himself.
The Orville.
Oh, Orville. Okay.
Yeah, and that's why it takes so long, is because he wants to have his hands on everything.
Yeah.
So
he's in it, right, too. So it's kind of like
I don't know how he finds the time. Seriously, when you realize everything.
He doesn't sleep much. He's not married. He doesn't have kids.
Yeah.
He just has his estate up there in the hills, and he works his butt off, and he loves what he does. My friend's been his personal assistant for probably 20 years or something like that. And she said that's all he does is work, but he loves it. And then twice a year, he has a huge party at his house, and he's up there on stage with a full orchestra singing for all the guests, and everybody has a good time. And that's kind of how he blows off steam. So
he's
a
our
genius.
age group. That's why I love his humor too, because all the
Yeah.
references he makes is like, hey, I remember that. I know that.
Yeah. Well, and also he grew up. Quahog is a giant clam that is very particular to where I grew up in southeastern, kind of south central Massachusetts, right around Rhode Island.
Yeah.
That's where they harvest quahogs, right on the shorelines, and it's like a specific food of that area. But he's from just over the other side of the border in Connecticut. So yeah, a lot of the inside kind of that part of the world humor too that he puts there. I'm always like, oh yeah, that's it's totally that thing that nobody understands, like quahog, like what a quahog is. Yeah, it's a giant clam that you steam and then you chop the meat up, you mix it with breaded stuffing and hot peppers, put it back in the shell, and then you serve it in that way. So yeah, good guy.
There you go.
Yeah, those are some awesome stories right there that you just told us. And I hate to go back to the other conversation because now I got so many more questions, but
oh yeah,
now I got to go back. So when you go from the YouTube channel to Netflix animation or to greenlit animation, James probably used maybe and I'm just throwing this out there, maybe like an Adobe or something similar to Adobe to make the animation on YouTube, and then you go from that to like studio animation. Was that a big change, or was it really the same program in general? Because
no, it was definitely a change because James actually doesn't use Adobe Animator or even any of the Toon Boom suite.
Oh wow!
Like he was doing like literal old school dropping still frames basically into Adobe Premiere. Like that's how he was doing it. That's why it was so limited in the, he would change position and obviously the audio would continue, but he was drawing all that stuff himself initially and just taught himself, how to transfer stuff from his tablet, that he got when he was 16 to putting it into that different space. So yeah, it was him getting to see the pipeline and working with the Toon Boom suite and all that could be done with that led him to create a new staff of people when he finished the show for his own show, because he wanted to elevate what that was and be able to build rigs and kind of do, things like that to really elevate his show. Because of course he had seen how far you can push it with what they did on Netflix. Still need to be producible, so he's spending more per episode, and it's not to the level obviously that we did on the show, but he's pushed it really, really far, and he's got a great team of people that he's put together from that. So it was a learning process for him as well, but he was totally geeking out on it, the whole time, and the animators looked and the sort of artists, everybody looked up to him, of course, because he's James freaking Rallison. He's the odd ones out. He created this empire himself, but he was always so like, no, you guys are more talented than me. Like, I was just like, dude, like there's different skill sets. Like you just haven't learned this stuff. Like you're amazing. You're a genius. You've done this channel that's created this world and this fan base, and your voice and your point of view is what the whole crew loves and looks up to you. Like, there's a lot of people who can draw. There's a lot of people who can draw really well, but there's not a lot of people who have a point of view that captures the attention of millions. That's very rare. And he's one of them. And he started to kind of come into his own and like really, kind of get comfortable with sharing his, rough drawings and stuff like that to express stuff to the board artists and the animators. And then it became a very collaborative process where they stopped seeing him so much as like this idol on the, the hill. And he stopped seeing them so much as like these superstars who went to animation school. And it was just like, oh no, we all love doing this. We're all good at what we do. Let's create something amazing together. And then by the end, it was like, they were going out to lunches, they were hanging out, they were playing, Magic the Gathering stuff together. Like they were just having like a really, good time. So it was really, really awesome to watch and, it's sweet to watch and not being a full-fledged animator of any sorts myself. I can't draw to save my life. I was like, sitting there going, oh, I wish I could draw like you guys. But I could relate. I could appreciate everything that they did. So it was really fun to watch him grow. Yeah.
That's awesome. It's always good to hear a story of come up like that, where somebody who started so young on a channel geared and millions picked into it, and then
Yeah.
now you're meeting people who have studied animation and like you're crossing ideas and learning from. So that's a really cool story to hear.
Yeah, I think it's really, and it's a good lesson in, like people like Chuck Lorre obviously have this reputation. My former boss, Dan Schneider, has this reputation. They're very micromanaging, but the problem with that is then you're not inspiring your crew. They feel like they're just there to kind of, they feel like they're the post service, right? Every day there's just another bag of mail and they go around, they put in mailboxes and they go to bed and the next day they come back and there's just more mail. Whereas if you bring them in and you just say, handcuffs are off, guys, go nuts, surprise me, come up with crazy crap that we wouldn't even expect. Then you get something really, truly amazing and you have a crew that is willing to work endless hours to make it as good as possible. And they really feel like they have a part of it, versus super controlling showrunners that just, it's all theirs and it's all their face on it and everything. Whereas James has been pretty vocal, about, he promoted our Sarah So, who started out as our supervising director on the LA board team. And then she ended up becoming a supervising producer by the end because she was so gosh darn good at what she did. She has a book, I think it's called like Juno or something like that. Six graphic novel series. But James promoted her on his Instagram. He doesn't do that for many people, but because of the relationships that were formed, because he was open to not, I'm going to be the boss and tell everybody what to do, but instead we're a team. Yeah. Let's make something great. Now he's got these people who they'll support him. And if he ever has another show, all he has to do is pick up the phone. And then he's got someone that he knows, loves to work with, who can knock it out of the park versus, Netflix or some other studio going, no, hire this person. No, hire this person. He gets to say, no, proof positive this person because they're freaking awesome. So
we've interviewed some producers that say they, and I've looked at their credits and I pointed out you like to work with certain people because they're always actors and people. It says yes because we know what they can do and we know we can trust them with these duties, that they're Also, I was going to point out the fact that he's willing to like play Magic the Gathering. It's more than just we work together. We also have fun together. We just chill. And I think that's an important relationship to have, especially in a creative space.
You got to be, if you keep everybody like they're beneath you, that's how they're going to feel. And you're never going to get out of them what you need. But, Phil Rosenthal, created Everybody Loves Raymond, always talked about sending everybody home at 6 o'clock every day because he wanted them to go home and get in fights with their significant other so that they could come in the next day and do a group therapy session basically in the writer's room and share their fight that they had and then turn it into an episode. So it's like, if you feel like you're all in it together, it just changes things. And granted, you can't just sit back and not be a leader. You have to lead. Because some people just want to be led. They just want to come in. They want you to go, this is the vision I have. This is what to do. But you also, like you said, you want to have them go, hey, come on, let's all go out to, the Dave and Buster's or whatever and play some video games or go to the, escape room or, whatever it might be. So yeah, it's a definite positive thing to do, for your crew.
Wow, this is a lot of good information that we got today, Ethan. So I just want to thank you. Paul, did you have any other questions?
We have one question we ask everybody at the end of the interview. This will make or break the interview.
It's the icebreaker question.
Yeah, but stop. Not an icebreaker.
It's Ethan's icebreaker question.
So, pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Oh, geez. Well, spoiler alert. I don't eat pizza. I haven't had pizza since 1993. There's a long story behind it. When I did eat pizza, would I have done pineapple on? I would have tried it. Would I have liked it as much as just like an old school, $5 slice in New York City or Boston or something like that? Probably, probably not. But then again, is it just pineapple on the pizza or is there pepperoni on the pizza?
Usually
'Cause
it's
then you got the
pineapple and
salty.
pepperoni. Yeah.
So you got
yeah,
the
It's
so-
salty and the
pineapple
sweet.
ham. Paul,
Yeah.
it's usually pineapple and
Oh, the,
ham.
oh, the
yeah,
Hawaiian.
whatever.
Okay,
Yeah.
kind of
The
thing. Well,
Hawaiian,
the
yeah.
funny thing about that question is we had I think she was a board artist. Um, um, her name was Ju. She was Brazilian, and she hated pineapple on pizza with a passion. To the point that she was so hilarious that we made her a character in, I think, the episode of Grandma's Boy. There's like this tall, lanky woman sitting at a table that gets knocked over by James and Grandma, played by Jane Lynch, in the thing. But yeah, that was like a running gag. It's so ironic that you guys asked that question because it was a running gag on on Oddballs. But yeah, I mean, thank you guys so much for having me. If I can just say, you know, the process of pitching a show is definitely an art form that takes a lot of time, to practice. If you're creating your own content and putting it out there and getting feedback, that kind of is a way of pitching. But obviously, if you really want to dig into it and learn, you can watch a bit more in James's, video pitching a show, which I think is probably hosted on my channel as well as his channel. Or you can check out a place like the Los Angeles Film School where I teach pitching. Like I literally teach what we did with James at the Los Angeles Film School. It's a great place to check out. I will just say, there's a lot of film schools in the country. A lot of them cost $85,000 a year. That's not the case with the Los Angeles Film School at all. And unlike most of the other ones, we are all actively working in the industry, in animation, in composition, in editing, in cinematography, writing, you name it. We're all working. So it's just a great place to learn more. But YouTube, where you guys are, also great place to go and find things on storytelling from Pixar and things of that sort. So definitely spend time on YouTube. Definitely go watch all the other episodes of the show after you watch this one. And yeah, thanks guys. I mean, keep me posted, and if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out.
Oh, no problem. Thank you so much, Ethan, for joining us today, and have a great day, and take care of that crocodile.
I will. Thanks guys. Have a good one.